Call Terence and tell him that he called me. I could not.
Okay, so I was talking about how oftentimes you would have used herbal medicine instinctively simply because of how your lifestyle is. Now, then the doctor comes and give you medication, and one such thing is turmeric. We use turmeric like crazy. Um, I know it's like in the curry powder mix, if I'm not mistaken, sometimes, depending if you make it yourself. Um, so we use it. We call it saffron. It's labeled saffron in the groceries, but it's not saffron. Saffron is a very thin thread threads that is super expensive. So we use turmeric, and then the doctor gives us a medicine that is a blood thinner. Now, that is going to cause your blood to be really, really thin, and it's going to cause complications for you. If you get a cut, it will affect blood clotting. It would affect, well, your blood is going to flow and it's going to be very thin. If it is that you go by the dentist for tooth extraction, it's going to be problematic. So this is why you want to tell your doctor exactly what it is you are on. Let them know all the supplements that you're taking. And if you can't remember it, at least take photos. And when you go to see your doctor, show them what it is that you're taking so they know to say, hey, stop taking this because I'm going to administer this to you. And because you don't want these side effects and then something bad happens and then, you're wondering what went wrong. Now, the quality and source of your herbal medicine, you must question it. Never, ever, ever take something from somebody that you have any doubts about. Go by the pharmacist if they're selling it in the grocery and ask a lot of questions. Ask them what the side effects are. If it is that you're not okay with going on the internet and finding the side effects, ask them before you make the purchase, right? Ask them all the questions that you want to ask them. Same thing for somebody who is selling a herbal medicine product, because if you look at all the businesses that they have online now, right? All of their taglines are weight loss, fertility, treatment for PCOS. And I'm using this because I have personally seen these things, right? But when you ask them about it, they don't want to tell you, or they say, I can't give you this information because it's our company private information. You need to know what it is that you are taking. And I believe I would just skip it over when we come to it later on. But basically, it is that if you look at a product and you cannot tell what the item, if somebody say it has 5 herbs in it, you need to be able to identify those 5 herbs, because what happens is that when you have dried herbs, it will disintegrate after time, right? It will break down. It will become a powder. It's going to be ineffective. It's probably going to be quote unquote expired, and it's not going to have any benefit to you, and it could probably cause sickness. So if people who sell a mix that is powder, and they don't want to tell you what is in this, or they just say, oh, I just have this in it, um, then don't buy it. Because I you see, what happens is that if you have a powdered mix and you keep opening that powdered mix, what's going to happen is a process called oxidation, where the air reacts with the powder and it takes away the medicinal properties from this thing. So it's going to disintegrate over time as well, and you don't know what decaying factors are going to be in this, you know. Um, and when something starts to disintegrate, it means that you risk there's death occurring, right? So you don't really want to put something like that into your body. So a lot of times people would have grown their own things, dry it. We'll mention this later on, and then you keep it and you're able to see it. Now, I'm not sure if you ever saw this, but there's sometimes if you buy a tea, um, especially if you like buy tea leaves, dry tea leaves, in the bottom of the packet starts to disintegrate first and it becomes a powder. And this works for seeds as well. So if it is you buy things like fennel or coriander or cumin and you have it in your kitchen pantry and you haven't used it for a while, you actually see that it starts to have weevil in it. It has you see casings for where the weevils start to grow and make their homes and they have their kids and their grandkids and there's powder on the bottom. Now, think of that this happening now to a herbal medicine mix. So this is why you need to assess the quality and the source. And if it is you have any doubt about this, then do not purchase from that individual. No matter the need, I'm sure you can find it somewhere else because you don't want to compromise your already at-risk self. So here, y'all can take the time and read through the revolution. I mean the evolution of herbal medicine and how it was used. Here is where I'm gonna
Sorry,
just
are you sharing? Sorry, I
oh,
raised my hand to ask if you're sharing
oh
sometime
sorry.
now because I'm not seeing it.
Sorry. Yeah, I forgot. My bad. Hey guys, if I don't share, just let me know that I'm not sharing, right? So I can but yeah. Okay. So in the document, you can go back and go through the history and the evolution of it. But there is okay, so here in China and India and most of the world before modern medicine, I think up until the 13th century, if I'm not mistaken, used to use something called medical astrology. And that is why you see in the Google Classroom, there's a link that says medical astrology YouTube links, because I touch on it every class and it's there if you need more information about it. But the gist of it is that the people believe that as above, so below, and that your point of birth, your location, the planet alignment, the plans that were that is specific to the day of your birth, they all contribute to who you are and your specific entity and how it's made up. Now, this information was important because when you chart something called your birth chart or your natal chart, it would tell you days that you can do things in your life, both in everyday life, work, career, marriage, etc., as well as the medical aspects of this. And people of the Hindu faith, actually Orisha, many people who are highly spiritual, usually when they go and get their readings done, the pundits or whoever it is will tell them, okay, you can't do these things on certain days. Similarly, you can't do surgery on certain days. And this was very important for doctors back then because they had to know how to do medical astrology to be able to make sure that they don't perform a surgery on a day that is undesirable. I had my chart personally done, and in my chart had planets of exaltation and detriment. And in it, it told me that when the moon was in a certain zodiac, it meant that if a planet is in detriment, it means that the zodiac that rules that specific organ system is going to cause me trouble. And for many, many years, I would have my ankle twisted, I would fall down, I would have swollen feet, and I had no idea what was going on. And then what I realized was that from the chart itself, my Pisces, the moon is in Pisces, it's a time of detriment for me. So I always know when the moon is in Pisces. The moon was in Pisces this weekend, and my feet were just swollen for no reason. Like I didn't do anything. I had to spirit Mobix and stuff because of how bad it is. Now, this is important information to know because then you know, okay, how do I plan my day? How do I plan my time if it is I'm going to have detriment? Sometimes, okay, when the moon is in Aries, I instinctively know now, I would have a need to do a face mask or a hair mask or something because Aries is associated with the brain. And usually this is information that herbalists use as well, especially in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, because they would often ask you, what's your birth time? And they would do the nature chart from that, and then they would be able to see all of this information and then better advise you, on what you may be predisposed to, or they might see the things that you already experience. And even with if it is you're going to undergo a GRA, then there are things that you need to be wary of. And I know there are some people who don't believe in this, and that is fine. But this is just something that happened in the history of herbal medicine. And it's something that I need to, mention, because like I said, it is part of the whole, and medical astrology is part of that holistic pizza. So a lot of times now you would see people have books and they would always talk about this guy, Nicholas Culpeper, and we'll meet Rosemary Gladster in our herbal preparations class. But he is basically considered the grandfather of modern herbal medicine. And this is where he combined traditional knowledge with astrological beliefs. So that's, both of the things that I mentioned just now. So now into modern day, we have our pharmaceuticals. Now, I don't really want to go in depth about this, one, because of time. But we have to understand it may sound it may sound like conspiratorialist, but we do know that most pharmaceutical companies are linked to billionaires and is linked to what is known as the capitalist agenda, where doctors get a percentage of whatever drugs that they sell. And if it is that they issue certain drugs, and they would try to push certain medicines or create a trend or the need for certain medicines to try and get people to purchase in it. So this is why you need to, educate yourself, and it's very important to educate yourself and learn things and not just go with one thing that you see. Now, if it is very popular question, ask why is this a need in the community right now? Why are they pushing this specific drug? What's going on? So you need to be able to ask questions. Now, we know that we cannot separate totally from modern medicine, because if somebody needs an emergency surgery, we need modern medicine to be able to take care of that situation, and then you can later treat it with herbal medicine afterwards. So this is where we have the integration and regulation, where we have complementary treatments for, using both modern medicine and herbal medicine techniques. If somebody has a liver that's compromised, they may not be able to use modern medicine. They would be able to use herbal medicine to help you with that. So we don't segregate it. Rather, it's complementary and you use it in time, together. Right. Okay. So we will cover research-based documents, but you need to know that the journals and medical documents that is published can be compromised, or people publish things based on the information that the person that is funding them wants. Unfortunately, this is something that happens, and I've seen it from personal experience. When I was doing my final year research in my undergrad, I had done it at a in Trinidad, but it was with in the institute where I did it had like international researchers from all over the world as well, and people was like very, very, very secretive about what they were doing because of the funding. Now, what my research found was that so my research wasn't solely my research. It was actually something that my lead professor was working on with other students. So it meant that as an undergrad student, who as you pass through, you get kind of come onto the project, you add your 2 cents to it, and you go and somebody builds on it. Now, what happened is that when we discovered something, and instead of implementing this new information, the institute decided to disregard the information and continue what they were doing prior. And this was like 10 years of research I'm talking about, right? So again, the stuff that gets published is, you have to take it. It's good information, but this is where educating yourself comes in. So how do you extract now what is correct and what is right? So often I would say look for the overlap in documents, look for the overlap. So if it is you're looking for something in traditional Chinese medicine, don't just look at one article, look at other articles, look at people who had similar research, Google the author, see who's like funding this, and don't just take research just because you Google it and it comes up. Because Google is just one of many search engines, and Google is paid to push certain things by people who pay for their website to be on the Google server. So again, don't ever just take what you get from the internet bold-faced, ask the questions. Find somebody who is knowledgeable, send them an email. Now, oftentimes research papers have somebody with an asterisk. That asterisk in their name means that they're the person that you can email to get more information on this. So if you need clarification, if you need anything, that person is the person who will be able to give you that. Okay. So here we talked about the benefits of herbal medicine prior and its application. Okay, so this is why when you would have messaged me about this course, one of the things I said is that it's not accredited and it's not certified. And the reason for that being is that herbal medicine on the whole has a lack of standardization, simply because the conditions that herbal medicine plants are grown in the Northwest America might be different to how it's grown in Trinidad. The harvesting time, the harvesting period, genetic mutations, any of those things. And also medicine is patient specific. So it's very individualized. And if it is very individualized, it's very hard to standardize and give a test about it, right? Because garlic grown in Trinidad might be different from garlic grown in India, simply because yes, we may seem to have similar climates, but India undergo things like monsoons. We don't experience monsoons. We do have a lot of flooding, but it's not like we have harsh winters or flooding that is really critical. So because of this, we can't really have standardization. So people who teach herbal medicine or have like a degree in herbal medicine usually does the course in natural sciences or botanical sciences, and part of their course would have gone into herbal medicine. But if it is like you're like me and I did my course with the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, and my course was a beginner to intermediate on vitalist herbalism practitioner. So that was super intensive. We covered anatomy, physiology of the organ systems, herbs that's going to treat it, recipes. Then we did the clinical setting. How do you go about taking information, analyzing this information, and then assessing it so that you can give treatment plans for patients. So these things, so even though I did all of that, I still would not be as accredited or certified because there was no way for anybody to test it and standardize it. So what I would have gotten is a certificate of completion or a certificate of participation that said that I did this course. So all herbal medicine courses are usually this. Now, traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine Usually, you have to go to India or China to study these at specific universities that do a certificate, a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD in this specific thing. And now in China, most doctors who do Western medicine also do traditional Chinese medicine simultaneously, to be able to treat patients both in a surgical way and in a traditional way. Now, we have the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Cultural Cooperation, and if you go on their Facebook page, I believe they have a form in which you can apply for scholarships to India for certifications, diploma, BSc, a BN in Ayurvedic. So it's different levels, because Trinidad and Tobago and India has bilateral relations, and they fund for all people to go across and learn and come back. So here we talked about when I mentioned contraindications and talking to your doctor about herbal medicine that you take. Here we have some drugs that can cause really bad side effects, which is time somebody might need a synthetic version of it. If it is that herbal medicine can cause an allergy, or it can cause high toxin levels, which can induce an allergic reaction, or it can have negative side effects. One of the things that I want to mention is that people who are neurodivergent oftentimes go undiagnosed, and women are highly masked, which means that they may be neurodivergent, but they do the things that neurotypical people do to hide their neurodivergent traits. Now, neurodivergent, like autistic, ADHD, etc., bipolar, etc., these brains are wired differently, and therefore herbal medicine is going to react differently for them. So this is important. So this is why, even if you think you might be autistic and you get a late stage diagnosis, it's still important, because you don't want to take certain things and does not give the desired effect, or two, it gives a highly undesirable effect. Now, I know for ADHD people, this is attention deficit hyper focus or something like that. Caffeine actually calms them down. It does not wake them up, it does not stimulate them, it actually calms them and like put them to sleep. So if they have coffee, they're not going to focus, they're not going to get this boost of energy. And same thing for energy drinks, it don't really work too well for people with ADHD. So this is where, again, holistic, there's so many different components that you need to take into considerations. It's not something that is just cut and dry and you can just give out. And here we have limited scientific evidence. So here I was talking about misdiagnosis, misuse. These are things that can, be limitations of herbal medicine. And then the lack of availability of trained practitioners. So unfortunately, in Trinidad, we do have a lot of herbalists. We do have a lot of people who learn ancestral herbalism, and they've been, practicing for a very long time. But when it is that it comes to administering treatment or, giving advice, oftentimes people disregard it. They only go to herbalists in times of dire, absolute desperation, that they're exasperated with their doctors. So now they decide to go by the herbalist. So usually it's people might not want to continue in this field because, again, it is expensive. I'm not gonna lie to you. If it is that you do a program like what I did, it was 14,000 TT, right? That's just one program of the different programs that I did. So imagine that you're investing in this and then people, disregarding you, they're mocking you, they're not taking you seriously. You're not getting jobs because people like asking a million questions, making you question your credibility. when you do have something significant to offer. So again, a lot of people really would not go down this path, unfortunately. Yeah. So balancing the scope and limitation, how do you do that? So you need to consult qualified practitioners. Make sure and ask when you go in, if you're paying for a service, make sure and ask all the questions that you need to. Like, don't overlook anything, because at the end of the day, you're giving them your money to help you. So we mentioned all of these things prior. Now, this is like the fun one. How do you set up your home apothecary or your so apothecary is like a ancient word for pharmacy. So how do you set up something like this for home? Now, this has a scope for commercial use, but this is for absolute home beginners, and this is something that is like in your kitchen, you using things that is already in your home. So here we have storage containers. You don't need to buy glass jars. When you buy products that has glass jars in it, you just use it and reuse it, because I've noticed on the market, mason jars like these with the metal rim tend to get rusty very quickly, and you really don't want that, because that rust could react with whatever you have in the jar and compromise your stored herbs or whatever it is. So here, this is an example of like you using, whatever jars you have, wash it, clean it, and sterilize it. Here we have a amber colored jar, or the bottles with the bottles here, and the bottles with the droppers or sprays. What happens is that if it is you don't want sunlight to interact and spoil whatever is in these jars, amber colored jars are the way to go, because they don't really allow light to come in. Now, why would we want glass and not plastic? Plastic leaches into whatever it is that it holds. Therefore, anytime you use plastic, it means that you are going to be consuming plastic in some form or fashion. Now, glass is non-reactive, so therefore you don't get that compromise of quality. It will not allow for things to grow in it. There's no light, there's no moisture, there's no air unless you open it. So here we have measuring and preparation. So here again, you want measuring cups, measuring spoons, simply because you want consistency. So measuring, you have your measuring cup for liquids. You have these that you can use for solids, these for like fine powders. So what it does, it helps you maintain accuracy and consistency in your when you make your recipes. Now we have a scale. A scale is always important, because sometimes if the ingredient is too fine or too high volume, what you want to do is you can have your scale, you can get a big glass bowl, you put it on, you tare it. So tare it means that you are zeroing it with the bowl on it, so that the weight that you see on the screen is not including the weight of the bowl. So in that case, you can just get high volume things, you weigh it, and you have an idea of what it is. So you have a ceramic bowl, metal bowl, and glass bowl. Now, I will not recommend using metal bowls unless you're not using it for a very long period of time, because unlike the ceramic and glass, metal is reactive and will react with whatever it is in that bowl, especially if it's something acidic. And then we have grinding devices. So I have this fancy one here just for aesthetic when I bought these Turkish spices. It's not very friendly in that you have to like grind like a million times to get fine grounds. So if it is, you can get a coffee grinder. This is really good. Mortar and pestle. This is good for when making paste, grinding fresh things. However, if it is you need to grind dry things, I would still recommend using an electronic one because the particle size would be consistent, almost even, and you will get a better result with this than this. It's also less labor intensive to use a grinder than the mortar and pestle. Now, the mortar and pestle you don't want to get the plastic ones, obviously, and you don't want to get the wooden ones because sometimes it's hard to grind with it. So if you need to invest in one that's marble or concrete or something like that, because like it might be a little on the expensive side if I'm not mistaken. Sincere's have one that's like $450. So that's why I say it's really like an investment. Now, why somebody wants to ask a question? Oh, okay. So why would you want to grind things? Especially when I mentioned that powdered things are compromised quickly, simply because making things smaller increases the surface area for reactions when you need to make a herbal preparation. And so oftentimes you would make this right before you make something else. So that way your powdered mix is not compromised in any form or fashion. Right, so brewing and infusions. Now, you can just have a simple teapot. I just included this picture with the clear one. It's not necessary to have a clear one unless you're specifically looking at the color. You can use this. That is absolutely fine. You can use a glass jar. You put the herbs in it, you strain it, and you use it. Here's an example of a double boiler, or you could set up one here with a water bath and your container that contains, in this case, more than likely, this might be like glycerin or something to make things like salves and balms, to infuse oil using the heat method, which we covered in herbal preparations in session 2. So these are things that you would need. You know, this is something that you can set up at home. You don't need this fancy equipment. You don't even need a fancy teapot. You can just use like your pot on your stove, cover it, do what you need to do, and strain it. So here are some straining tools that you would see on the market. Usually people would have versions of this tea infuser. It is absolutely not necessary. Oftentimes it's usually just for aesthetic or for single serve tea. But why I will not recommend it, even though if you're a customer from me and you will see it on my page, it's just part of a gift package, you know, for people who want it. But I do not recommend it if it is that you're going to use herbal medicine, simply because dried herbs expand when you boil them or add the water to them. It absorbs it soaks in the water, it expands, and it needs space to expand. So if it is in this tiny little infuser, you are compromising that expansion process, and then you might stop the reaction because the herbs can't open out. So an alternative might be to use something like a bigger strainer, or like I said, a pot and a jar is totally acceptable. Remember, we don't want to we want to choose what we invest in, because this is a home apothecary. So it means whatever is in your kitchen, you can adapt and use it. So here we have the filtration cloth. So here, you can use muslin, you can use brown cotton. There are something called nut milk bags on the market, which is basically the same thing in different forms. So you can use that as well to strain it if it is that having a metal strainer does not work, because oftentimes the metal strainer can get rusty, because even though things say stainless steel, it's never really stainless steel. We know that. So when exposed to moisture for very long periods, metals tend to rust. It also means that the wire here, the frame, the netting on the infuser might be too wide. So you want to use a cloth to be able to get the smaller particles from whatever it is you strain it. Now, this one is my absolute favorite. It still allows particles and herbs to come into the tea, but it honestly doesn't bother me. It's just that this is really a lazy way to handle situations. And I'm also a coffee drinker, so it's absolutely fine. So this is what is called a French press. And you're basically gonna put the herbs, your hot water, and then you're gonna press the press to remain on the surface. And when your stuff infused, you press it down, and most of the herbs are gonna remain at the bottom. But some of it, like I said, it depends on the mesh, right? How thick it is. You might get some small particles coming into your tea. If that's fine with you, then it's a good investment. Now, I was looking for cheap options. Fan Square had one that was like $85 for like a 12 ounce, but they raised their price and it's now $125. Okay, so if it is that we have our own fresh herbs, what do we do with it? Or if you buy seasoning in the market and you can't use it, or you've just been busy and it's you're known for your stuff wilting, you can dehydrate it. Dehydrating removes the moisture and it preserves the herb with all the medicinal properties intact in that dry piece. So you can toss it in the oven at low heat, your toaster oven. This is traditional drying racks where they would it's wooden and they would have the herbs there. Here is something that they would put out to the sun as well. And this is where I think if you go on Pinterest or you Google it, most people who have like herbs in their kitchen, this is how they hang it. They would have like a rack and they would hang it to hang down and dry. However, this can be compromised if it is you don't cobweb often or you don't wipe your walls or you have a lot of dust coming in. So this is not a safe option. So it depends on where your operation is. So after you've dehydrated it, you can now put it in a glass jar and keep it and use it when you need to use it. So I personally like to, when I'm using dried herbs, like if I'm cooking, and add some, like I crush it and I add some hot water and I allow it to bloom before I add it to my food. If it is that I'm not cooking with a lot of water, I would like do that. If it is I'm making food that is like pilau or a cook up, like stew or something where you have a lot of water in your food, it's fine to just stir it in dried because the water in the food is going to rehydrate it and do the job. So documentation and label. This is very important because sometimes while you make a herbal preparation, you may change it based on somebody might have allergic reaction and you do a substitution or the lack of availability of an ingredient or the time that you're doing it. Write it down. Details, everything. Edits, everything. Observations, write it down. Something smells weird, write it down and take notes of it. You want to be able, so you can have a field journal. You can have a simple writing notepad. You can use a copy. This is like a checkered line copybook. You could use a normal notebook. Whatever it is, write it down. However, you will forget it. Even, so you want to make sure and write it down and don't ever take it